So, welcome and thank you all for coming to support our amazing fellows. This is week 4 of 4 of our Emerging Black Clinicians closing presentations for the 2022 cohort. My name is Deanna Jimenez. I am core faculty in the Somatic department at CIIS and honored to be the program manager for Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship. I have had the honor to support these fellows throughout their journey this past 7 months. And I am beyond grateful for the grant that has afforded the opportunity for Black identified students in the Masters of Clinical Psychology programs pre-practicum to integrate their course studies with Black psychology and in the service of Black communities. At this time, I'd like to introduce 2 key players that have worked tirelessly and ongoingly, and their involvement is what has allowed us the opportunity that we have right now. Unfortunately, Rachel Bryant was unable to join this evening, the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So we will miss her introduction, but I would like to introduce Dr. Adiba Detterville, core faculty in the School of Undergraduate Studies, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and founding director for Center of Black and Indigenous Praxis. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Greetings. Hey, Emerging Black Clinicians Fellowship Program and all of the supporters. It's so good to see everybody. You know, every day is a good day to wake up in Blackness, right? All right. Yes, 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 yes. So just giving thanks for this opportunity for us to again gather in this final round of presentations. I'm not going to be able to stay on for the full session today, so I'm going to look at the recording and offer some feedback and uplift after I see the recording to anyone whose presentations I'm not able to be present for. But I know they're going to be excellent because I know you've been in good hands for the last 7 months. And those of you who have been active participants in the BPP, I know you're going to bring the Blackness and I'm going to be looking for it. And you know, if it's missing, I'm going to help you find it. So I'm excited to see the recording. I'm excited to see the presentations. And I'm just so grateful that you all are here and doing this work. It is good work. It's difficult sometimes, but it is always good work. So stay encouraged. If you need anything, you know where I am. The Center for Black and Indigenous Praxis is here. The Black Psychology Project is here. Deanna is here, and many, many other helping hands. So congratulations to all of the fellows. Good job. Well done. I appreciate this, the work that we're all doing together. May the ancestors continue to bless and guide us.
Thank you, Dr. D. And now I'd like to invite or introduce Heidi Wells. Heidi is clinical director with Huckleberry Youth Programs and a wonderful CIIS partner and co-ally. Hi, Heidi.
Hi. I was just trying to figure out how to unmute myself. Hey, everybody. I'm so happy to be here with you all again. I have really just been loving these presentations and just feeling so honored to be here and hear all of the wonderful work you guys have been doing. If you don't know about Huckleberry Youth Programs, we've been building a relationship with CIIS over the past couple of years, and that's been based on alignment with our mission. In addition to being the clinical director, I'm also in private practice, and I specialize in working with complex trauma and trauma related to issues within the Black community. And so I'm inspired by your goals and what you're doing. Every week I've been sharing some statistics, and I really want you to hear them again and to have it sink in that the Black community does not have Black clinicians to sit with. The Black community in the United States does not have Black psychologists, psychiatrists, and therapists just sit with. In the United States as a total, only 4% of clinicians are Black. 4%. In San Francisco, there are 2%. 2% of clinicians in the Bay Area are Black. And think of the need that we have. And so that means that our community is not sitting with folks that they resonate with or that may resonate with their story. And so that is why I am here. I did not have a program like this when I was coming through JFKU. I wish I would have had someone like Dr. Dieterville or someone to guide me in the way that you guys have had this precious gift. I'm here to support you. Huckleberry is also working to create a pipeline of mentorship and possible employment for Black clinicians that is equitable. And so I'm going to put my information in the chat. Feel free to reach out and ask me a question or just reach out to me if there's anything you're curious about. Please give me your contact information. I'm going to ask some of you to come and present to our clinicians at Huckleberry Youth Programs as another way to put yourself out in the community and practice sharing all of this great work that you've done. So thank you for having me here today, and I can't wait to hear your presentations.
Deanna, you're muted.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Heidi. And your partnership is valuable, and your organization story really represents why the fellowship is so essential. So thank you. Before we move into presentations, I just dropped into the chat and the application. We are accepting applications for our 2022-23 cohort, which begins in December. Applications close in November. If you or anyone you know is eligible, please invite them to attend our informational, which is going to be next Friday, the 28th. And you can find more information on SharePoint. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first fellow. This first fellow, Kenyona Young, is a 2024 graduate candidate in the Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology, Somatic emphasis. Hello, Kenyona.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Kenyona. The name of my presentation is Sawubona. Sawubona is it's a greeting that locates you in your ancestry. And for me, it's a dream, it's a concept, it's an idea. And what I really hope that you all get from this is just inspired to move beyond the concept into structure and beyond. So that's what I really hope that you get from this. All right, I'm gonna be reading a little bit, so bear with me. Okay, so as already stated, my name is Kenyona. I am from the ghettos of Oakland, California. I am from the village of Smith and Young, Hines and Gibson. And I call the names of all of those who support me and hold me on my journey. I call in the name of Mama Ware, Maddie Mae Young. I call in the name of Dia. I call in the name of my grannies, Bessie Lucille and Helen Smith. I call in the name of my daddy, Kenneth Young. I call in the name of Naya, Cecilia, Kelly, Amber and Amber. I call in the name of Ashley and Alyssa. I call in the name of Ty, Jen, Asabi, Tracy. I call in the name of Deanna, and I call in the name of Dr. Kathleen. I appreciate you all, and I am so blessed to have all of you sitting here with me now and supporting me. So I'm going to show this clip. And before I show it, I really want to give you the opportunity to sit with what Sawubona means to me as a concept as you listen to the clip explain what Sawubona means. And so as a concept, if we can just hold Sawubona as as actual physical space of bodies connecting, right? So of actual physical collective space that is collectively held and created for us by us. So hold that as you listen to what Sawubona means in a more literal sense.
Sawubona. Sawubona is an ancient isiZulu greeting, which means we see you. It's equivalent to hello or namaste. So when we meet on the streets and we see each other and I greet you, I would say, Sawubona, we see you. And you will respond by saying, Yebo, Sawubona. Yes, we see you too. Why do we say we see you when it is just me, a single individual person, greeting you? And why do you respond the same when it's just you, a single individual person, greeting me? In isiZulu tradition, the I is a connection to an ancient lineage of family and ancestry, which means my lineage, my family and my ancestry are always with me. I'm never alone. So when you meet me, not only are you meeting me, but you're also meeting my lineage, which I represent. But Sawubona is more than just a greeting, right? It also means to acknowledge and to recognize each other, to bring each other into existence in this space that we are living. It is an invitation to a deep witnessing and presence. We invite each other to communicate and explore the possibilities of how we can help each other in this space that we are meeting.
And so a little bit about what Sawubona means to me. Sawubona means to me that I hold highest value in the relational space, in the we, and I believe in the power of this relational space. I believe in the I in support of the we. Sawubona is a deeply healing and liberational space. Sawubona is the we. Sawubona is the collective. When I think about the we, when I think about Black folks, I think about how we hold the land and how our collective bodies is connected to this American soil in particular. So when I'm speaking of the we, I'm not just speaking of our collective bodies, I'm also speaking about the land. And I believe that in this, we need to honor our history and that we must hold, and in honoring our history, we must hold physical space, as well as spiritual space, emotional space, financial space, and beyond. So in thinking about Sawubona as the collective, right, as the we, but also as the collective supports cooperative efforts of healing. We believe that Sawubona has the potential to be both a physical space and a transcendent space for clinicians, practitioners, healers, flesh-bound bodies, and ancestors. This space would support the limitless possibilities of the collective, and it would support whatever branches that would grow from the trunk of our grandmother's tree. It would support that because Sawubona is the we that believes in the collective knowledge of the cooperative, full stop. And so in trying to come out of the metaphysical space of this concept for myself, I wanted to develop a few basic tenets. They're here on the screen. I'm also going to read them. Sawubona, we believe that the world we are born into exists within a Euro-white supremacist foundation that is both downloaded through DNA and indoctrinated. We believe that human suffering, mental, physical, financial, etc., is rooted in settler colonialist foundations of America and the broader Euro-white supremacist ideology. We believe in creating and cultivating cooperative spaces of dynamic love and community in support of Black, Indigenous, Aboriginal, POC, queer, and all intersecting bodies of liberation. We believe that these basic beliefs and this document is living and will continue to grow. A little bit on inclusion. Lately, I have been reckoning with anti-Blackness and the way it is the way racism is visited upon our bodies in particular. And so while I believe in all of these things, and this is very living for me, I also believe that it is extremely important that we have spaces that are just Black. Moving forward, I'd like to have a short discussion around highest values. So take a few minutes and just think about what are your highest values? Where do you hold highest value? Because Sawubona is about creating space that is completely embedded in our highest values. So just take a moment and think about that. And I'm gonna start us off. I'm gonna popcorn it. I am from, and many of us are from, a call and response culture. And so I'm gonna popcorn it to you, to whomever. And if you feel so inclined, please share. And if you don't, just popcorn it to somebody else. And so I'm gonna start us off, and I'm also gonna bring us back around. And so in starting, I will say that I hold highest value and respect. And as Dr. Joy DeGruy has shared in her work, respect means to look again, to value others. And I'll go beyond that and say it is to value Earth, it is to value nature. So I'll start there, and I'm going to popcorn it to Cecilia. Where do you hold highest value?
I hold highest value in the ability for each living organism to thrive, to enjoy the warmth of the sun, the warmth of connection, and the warmth that one feels when things are not going well, to be resilient and to continue to thrive. I'm gonna call on Tracy.
Hi, so I value truth and authenticity. And where do I hold highest value? And the ability for each person to live that truth and authenticity unquestioned and unoppressed.
And can you popcorn it to one other person?
I'm so sorry. How about I popcorn it to Heidi?
Okay.
I had a feeling you were going to pick me. Okay, I guess I haven't had time to think this through because I'm thinking about so many different things, but I think I hold in highest value purposeful peace that comes from intentionality, that allows one to create a peaceful environment despite external circumstances, legacies, oppression, and all of the things that become barriers to us having internal peace.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just going to close this out by saying that, or this section out by saying that a final highest value for me is I believe in the we. I believe in Sawubona. I believe in the power of the collective as a relational space of well-being and wellness. All right. So again, in thinking about this concept, I try to think for myself, well, what is my mission statement? What do I think about this? Like, I'm really trying to take it out of this metaphysical sphere and bring it into and ground it here in the real world. And so in doing so, this is what I came up with. We know the story of one Black woman breaking from Euro white supremacist norms, tapping into her creativity and the power of this narrative that it holds, and the power this narrative holds in our communities. The foundation of this Black woman's work is often laid in her highest values. She believes in herself and she understands the inner workings of whatever particular speciality or market that she is in. And she holds space for herself and other folks usually. Her reach is limitless, it is inspirational, and it will have an amazing impact on the world. And so when I think about this, I think about Oprah, right? I think about Madam C.J. Walker. I think about one of my personal favorites, Toni Morrison. And many of you, right? I think about how as individuals, we've been able to really move and do so many things alone, and how beautiful and inspirational and impactful that has been. But Sawubona is a dream of the collective. It is a dream of the collective. And in this space, we collectively break from Euro white supremacist norms. We tap into our collective creativity together in support of reconnecting to spirit and ancestor in our work. We lay foundations of our work within our highest values, and we cooperatively hold space for each other. Our reach will know no bounds. Our work, no matter the speciality, will be the work of healing. Our work will go beyond powerful. It will go beyond inspirational. It would go beyond impactful. This work would be truly magical. And so that's the dream of Sawubona. That's the mission. If I wanted folks to take one thing from this presentation, what I would want is for you to remember that we equals you plus one. That's what it equals, that's it. And so you can start right now. You can start by just connecting with the other women that you've seen in space. You can reach out to me and say, listen, this collective thing sounds great. How do we start talking about it? How do we start to generate ideas for what a collective might look like? Especially in our realm where we're talking about therapeutics. How do we start a space that is a therapeutic collective, that is supportive to us, that is for us, by us, right? How do we start that? And the truth of the matter is, it's like, this is a dream that I had that lived inside of me for a long time. And it wasn't until I started to speak it out into the world that I realized that it exists inside of a collective consciousness. There's so many people that want this, that need this, and I don't have all the answers. And so my dream, again, is to see Sawubona grow beyond any concept that I could have, and to have folks reach out to me and say, listen, I got some ideas, and for me to be like, okay, let's do it. Whatever is in your capacity. But some of the ways that you can start is you can start by creating community. You can start by thinking about land trust and what that might look like and how we might invest in land trust. We could start by just organizing. If you know how to secure funding, you could start by figuring out, okay, I know how to secure funding, so maybe I'll connect to somebody else who has some concepts and some ideas, and how do we move forward? I think one of the beautiful things is that, like I said, when I started to speak about this outside of myself, Cecilia and I connected, and what we realized is that this is a collective consciousness. And so the beautiful presentation that's coming after mine is going to show you just how these things start, right? Sort of that building of that structure. And so I'm excited for that. I won't be able to see it because I have to leave, but I cannot wait to watch the recording. But that's how you start. And so my invitation is just start with a conversation. I don't know why I just pushed myself all the way out. I didn't mean to do that. Let me load. All right. So final slide, which I'm gonna get to. I don't know why I did that. It was an accident. Is this one, which is just really, again, a reminder that Sawubona is about us connecting. And in the absence of physical space, we can connect how we're doing right now. We can connect body to body. We can connect over Zoom. We can connect over phone. And so we might not have a physical space to start doing things, but we can connect right now doing this. So I'm going to open the floor for any questions, any comments. And if not, I will stop sharing screen and we can move forward. Thank you so much.
I'd like to say, oh, who was talking? I wanted to actually see faces as we talk around the we. I was really looking forward to coming back to the collective, to seeing faces as a form of supporting me and grounding me. Thank you so much. I was touched even at the opening as you called in names. And what came for me when you were saying, you know, it's like moving pebbles to create these larger shifts. And even like the small practice of rituals that allow us to embody the we, that call us into the collective, even if it's unconscious, but even that practice that you started at the beginning just felt so aligned with your presentation. So thank you for that. And yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Kenyona. Just the poetry, it was just poetic. Your visuals, the way that you delivered this, just very grateful to be in community with you and have our work be in conversation with each other. So thank you so much.
So I'd like to make space for anyone else who'd like to speak into the room, or I invite you to put it in the chat. I see acknowledgements coming into the chat. So if that feels most comfortable, please just give your acknowledgements there. And Kenyona will have a moment to read that as well.
I do. This is Kelly, and I just wanted to say, Kenyona, what a powerful and magnificent and beautiful presentation. It really warmed my heart, and the power of the collective is so important, and I really appreciate this presentation, and I have enjoyed learning from you. So thank you.
Thank you. I actually just want to say one more reflection as I pass on. I'm feeling the pace in which we move in order to bring everyone with us. That feels kind of out of sync of how we normally run, like the pace, and I heard poetic, but just the pace of speaking so that we can all be together in the conversation. I was feeling that as well. Thank you. So thank you, Kenyona. And our next presenter is Cecilia Usher. Cecilia is a 2024 graduate candidate, Masters of Arts in Counseling Psychology, Somatic emphasis. Greetings, Cecilia.
Okay, thank you so much. Hopefully you can see my first slide. Again, deep gratitude to Kenyona for pouring the libations for us this evening. So, let me just take a moment to gather myself here because that was so powerful. So again, thank you for joining us today. My name is Cecilia Usher, and this presentation is an exploration of the possibilities of cooperative economics in private practice. And before I start, I would be amiss if I didn't acknowledge the ancestors, all of the ancestors, in fact, that brought us together in this space and time. I also want to acknowledge Dr. Dedeville, for the opportunity to be part of the Emerging Black Clinician Fellowship, as well as part of the Jegnaship and exposing me to her wonderful Sankofa praxis. It is not lost on me that I stand on the shoulders of the work that both you and Rachel Bryant have done in CIIS, and we thank you for that. I also want to thank Deanna Jimenez for holding space and her thought partnership. She's been a rock for me during my time at CIIS, and I greatly appreciate you. So a little bit about myself. I have family roots in Ghana and was born in the UK and currently live in Los Angeles. I claim a multicultural lived experience. So for those of you who are familiar with Ghana and Ghanaian culture, my mother is an ethnic Ga, my father is an ethnic Fanti. And while embracing all of my multitudes, I also recognize the complexity of my positionality of being Black in America, which has inspired my commitment to intergenerational healing in communities of color in the United States, as well as in the African diaspora. So before I move on, I have a question for you all. When you think about cooperative economics, what is it that you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? When I first thought about cooperative economics, one of the first things that came to my mind was my aunties and them providing childcare while my parents went to work. So this is an exploration. So I'm inviting you to either unmute or type in the chat and share what your experience of cooperative economics are in your friend group, in your families, and in your community. So let's just take a few minutes to drop that in the chat. As I said, feel free to unmute also.
I know for me personally, when I think about cooperative economics, I think about how my sister was a hair braider, and oftentimes it would be like, you know, if you can braid my hair, then I can do this thing for you, you know, or, you know, if somebody didn't have money, we would just sort of barter.
That's a great one. Thank you, Kenyona. I'm reading the chat. I'm seeing family financial support, sharing childcare with friends, and sharing elder care.
Sorry.
It's okay. Go ahead, Tracy.
I'm thinking of community gardens or community sustained agriculture and the sharing of crops and food is love.
Yes, I resonate with that. Mutual aid networks, as opposed to a cumulative resource acquirement, the motion of resources outward and circular. Yes, yes. Sharing resources, giving at capacity, thinking beyond the dollar. These are all really great. Carpooling for the kids, yes. Especially when gas prices are what they are right now. Giving it the last few moments for anything else. Okay. Cooperative economics allows the same goods and services to transfer without taxation. Can be really helpful for resource management. Yeah. If you're selling something, sorry, I lost my space. Let's see. If you're selling something, having options at low income communities can access. co-living. Yes. Yeah, these are all really great. Excellent. Keep them coming, keep your thoughts coming, and I invite you to stay open to what things come up for you in the course of this presentation, whether it's a song, a thought, a memory, something that comes up for you. I think it might be really valuable, and I'm hoping that this presentation acts as somewhat of a portal for us to collectively begin to think of it. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my whys. So the first point on this slide says complicity in capitalism and a desire to explore and operationalize alternatives, right? That's a really fancy way of saying I've spent money on a lot of stuff that I probably didn't need and I want to do better, okay? So I grew up in public housing, which I believe is important to share with you all because it provides insight into my early socioeconomic context. I recall being very eager from a young age to earn my own money so that I could buy the things I wanted, which included name brand sneakers and more fancy clothes. When I immigrated to the United States, I was earning very little money, but as my income grew, I was able to buy things and have experiences that I dreamed of as having as a child. Nothing too ostentatious, nothing really out there, but I recognize being caught up in a series of toxic workplaces and my use of retail therapy as a coping mechanism are definitely connected. As many of us have experienced before, and particularly since 2020, many institutions are yet to back their commitment to change with actions. However, through my experiences in the workplace and learning spaces, I've really come to appreciate the power of mutual support to counter that. So this is a moment where I have to give a big, huge shout out to the Soma sisters, Amber, Kelly, Kenyona, my Black Intel crew, and the CIIS EXA sisters. And lastly, I believe that cooperative economics represents for me a return to ancestral practices. So if you look really closely at the picture on your left, this is a picture of my grandmother. And if you look at her cloth, you can see that it says Ghana Cooperative Council. So a little bit about my beloved grandmother. She was widowed with 7 children. And as a result, had to pivot, as we might say now, in order to keep a roof over her head, to support her children, to feed her children, and to be able to send them to school. So one of the stories that I've heard in my family is that she was part of a women's cooperative that made hair pomade. On the right of the screen, you can see a picture of my Uncle Sheriff, who stowed away from Ghana to the UK in the 1950s. So Sheriff was not his real birth name, but the story that I was given is that he received this name because he was able to read and write English, which he was able to use to support other African immigrants. He was able to eventually buy a house, and it became a kind of collective cooperative house in which other African immigrants could stay with him and his partner until they were able to financially support themselves and then move into their own spaces. I was actually born into this house. So when my parents immigrated from Ghana to the UK, they first lived here. I was born into this collective structure until they moved out into their own space. So my interest in cooperative economics has been reignited by my experience of grad school and my discomfort with the normalization of student debt. Having a conversation with somebody earlier this week, they used such a beautiful phrase that I can no longer remember to describe this phenomenon, and I'm hoping that they will share it with the group at some point. But I think there is the potential for students who have the weight of student debt to be forced into spaces that don't prioritize staff care. And if you take a close look at this graph, you'll notice that the cost of higher education has far-reaching effects for Black and Latino folks, with Black women incurring the most graduate debt. In addition, during one of our emerging Black clinician sessions, guest speakers who were licensed practicing therapists identified that they felt ill-prepared for the business side of private practice. In doing this research, I've also come to see cooperative economics as an alternative to the growing global mental health tech industry, which is projected to be worth $17.5 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars by 2030. I'm going to repeat that again. The mental health tech industry is projected to be worth $17.5 billion by 2030. I feel that cooperative economics can be a means for the redistribution of wealth created by and going directly to BIPOC communities. So I believe that cooperative economics provides an opportunity to move from words to purpose-driven, values-based action, which Kenyona spoke so beautifully about in her presentation. This is increasingly important to me as I move into the future. I'm intentionally doing this through reconnection to ancestral practices because, in the words of Dr. Karenga, they give a person a means to celebrate themselves, their history, rather than simply imitate the practice of dominant culture. Drawing on what I'm learning about Dr. Karenga's philosophy of Kawida, which seeks to promote the synthesis of Pan-African knowledge through time and space, I'm curious how we can cultivate private therapeutic practices that are values-driven and sustainable for Black and non-Black clinicians of color, as well as the people they serve. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the slide that you're seeing here. So context is super important to me. If you've been in the class, I will dive down that historical rabbit hole because I really do believe, for me at least, it provides a visceral somatic connection to what I'm separated from by space and time. So for example, these two symbols used to represent two principles of Nguzo Shaba, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, is represented by an Adinkra symbol of the Akan people of Ghana. And Ujima, cooperative economics, is represented by an Nsibidi symbol from the Ejegham people of southeastern Nigeria. These really do give us an insight into the historic longevity of cooperative principles that have been guiding communities for centuries. If we go back to Ujima, collective work and responsibility, the literal meaning of Akuma Ntwaso, and I had to clap because that's how that helps me with the pronunciation of Ntwaso, means linked or continuation of hearts. For me, having a felt sense of this symbol supports my synthesis and acts as an ancestral resource when being taught contemporary concepts such as relational matrix, intersubjectivity, attunement, and somatic resonance. And as an guiding principle for future practice. So cooperative economics can be seen also in the practice of susu or partner, or the many other names that are used throughout the African diaspora, as well as other communities that are spread throughout the world. So susu is a savings club where people pool their money in order to access accountability, mutual support, and funds in, say, the event of emergencies. So as I was working on this presentation, I was running it past somebody. And while I was talking about susu, they really gained an insight when it became clear that susu is about we, not just I. Their initial reaction was, well, why doesn't a person just save money, right? Again, it is that spirit of Sawubona. It is the spirit of Ubuntu. It isn't just about me. There is a we at play here. So as we identified earlier, cooperative economics has been a long-standing practice in the US. The work of Jessica Nebhard provides an outstanding history of cooperatives in the African American community, and her work really helped illuminate for me the origins of well-established Black institutions in Los Angeles, like the first AME Church, which was started in Philadelphia in the 18th century by the Free African Mutual Aid Society. Dr. Nebhard also points out that in the 18th century, Black women led the majority of mutual aid societies in the United States. Regarding the work of Adjoa Nziga Mfayethu, not only is she a writer, but the co-founder of the Ella Jo Baker Intentional Community, a housing cooperative in Washington, D.C., guided by the principles of Nguzu Saba, where residents are engaged in activism with 15 units, including a garden where they grow their own produce. So also included in this slide is Ella Jo Baker herself, whom many of us know as a leading figure in the civil rights movement. Prior to her activities with the civil rights movement, Ella Jo Baker was heavily involved in the cooperative movement during the 1930s. So what does this mean and look like for clinicians in private practice? A contemporary example is the Alliance for Psychological Services of New York. This is a group of mostly LSWs and one licensed clinical psychologist that is based on the East Coast. From what I've learned, they operate on an employee owner model and have flexible sliding scale for clients. What's interesting to me about this practice is that it's made up of clinicians working under different types of licenses. For me, cooperatives also represent sites for innovation. What if private practices were composed of integrative teams that consisted of housing specialists, financial social workers, nutritionists, and clinicians? Cooperatives can draw together resources, financial and otherwise, skills, democratic decision-making, and needs assessment based on individual context. The work of Dr. Nebhard illuminates that historically, cooperatives have successfully addressed the effects of crises, COVID-19, looming recession, survive crises better, and provide access to generational wealth. And something that really resonates with me is the potential for cooperative practice to be sites for resisting the status quo that is surrounding therapist burnout. So while workplace burnout has received a lot of attention in the last 2 years, I think most of us know that this is not new. We've heard this repeatedly in presentations in this series, that the number of Black clinicians is disproportionately low in comparison to the US Black population. So looking at this slide and hearing about the increasing number of therapists who are having to step away from their positions, I am going to offer the suggestion that perhaps the pandemic was a tipping point for many that magnified the gap between surviving and thriving. And in this season of my life, I'm really looking to thrive and hope that others are inspired to conspire in that thriving with me. So as I draw to a close, I am going to, again, invite you to view this presentation as a portal for collective dreaming about cooperatives and the potential for the cooperative practice, private practice model. With the framework and personal context I provided, I'm curious to hear what came up for folks. Again, those songs, those images, those words or statements. So I'm going to invite you to just take a few moments before we close out and share, to maybe put in the chat, perhaps share what came up for you.
I have something to share. Can you guys hear me good? Because my computer's, okay, let me check. Okay. When I did my second internship, I had the opportunity to join a private practice in Oakland, run by Joy Johnson. She's a 30-year Black clinician, very well respected in the community. And it was my first experience being held so wonderfully by a woman of color as a mentor. But what was more inspiring is this very thing that's connected to your presentation, is that she bought the building. She bought the building. She remodeled it and hired all Black clinicians to work in her office. And she modeled what wealth could look like. She charged rent. She modeled how to be a Black successful businesswoman. I mean, I have to tell you, it was the greatest experience of my training to work under her leadership. And so that was years ago when I was first starting out, but it was always my dream to follow in her footsteps and have, like, buy a building. Obviously that's a very expensive endeavor, but you know, to buy a building and rent it out and have all clinicians of color, and maybe have acupuncturists of color, and have total healing. And so if anyone wants to collaborate on a future endeavor, I am in on this, because I love this idea. I absolutely love it. And thank you so much, Cecilia, for this wonderful presentation, because it ties in with Kenyona's presentation about we win. When we're together, we win. So I really love this, and thank you so much.
Thank you for that joyous share. I really felt the connection to that past mentor of yours, and the model that you spoke so highly of, is that I think we're repeatedly given these models, and then the messages that we get is that this is not how it's done. This is the exception. And we know that it isn't. Thank you so much, Heidi.
One thing that came to mind for me was like a systems approach to therapy. And also like an expansion of that is that idealistically, I think that the dream is that everybody is a therapist and we're there to therapize each other. And so our interactions with any random person on the street or whomever, they have a settled mind, settled body, and the exchange is just super like enriching and therapeutic. And so, yeah, I'm loving where you're coming from, and yeah, I'm loving the ways that I can think of how this could bloom and just utopia can be in existence.
I'm going to go to the chat unless that person would like to share theirs.
That was me. I think I'll speak. Your question was what the presentation brought up, and I was struck by how many examples I could bring up of just in my family structure, in my growing up, that cooperative economics and cooperative ways of being were just folded in to the life. And so how to be even more conscious of that in order to continue it. It's like putting words to not only what is happening, but the why, I think allows me to then like intentionally pass it on to next generations, as opposed to this is just how it is. I feel like so much information gets lost in the this is just how it is.
Right.
So being intentional, like there was so much wisdom and purpose in why people, it wasn't just survival. It was so beyond for survival. It was thriving. It was the we, it was, yeah. So I'll now read what I said. I said, I'm sitting with the ways I have been practicing cooperative practices or being in practice, cooperative practices, as well as ways I can be more intentional. Thank you for your presentation. I'm so touched.
Thank you, Deanna. Jay.
Yeah, hi. Something came up for me around like, you know, as as a model of existence, of operating, of working, of providing, there's an implicit, I think, bias towards individual being better and cooperative being like, you know, regressive, or, you know, and I'm wondering what kind of work has to happen at the individual and collective level around like a new set of expectations and norms and practices to uphold the cooperative system. And as the past speaker was just saying, it brought up something that my cousin was just telling me about my grandmother who just passed. And my grandfather's mother lived with them and taught her how to make cakes, and she made those cakes, and her family, who had never had those types of cakes, benefited from those cakes. And it was very interesting around this collective living, around this kind of higher level, these higher level benefits that happen, where like you have a whole community of people who were able to experience something by way of one person who kind of sat at the interface because they lived collectively in a house with, you know, great grandma or grandma, you know, the whole 9 yards. But there wasn't a sense of that being like, we'll just go out and buy it, or like go find the recipe like on your own, you know, go to the library and get it. There was a transference. So I'm curious about, you know, what are your thoughts around, I don't want to say training, but kind of the practices that people need to begin in learning as well to uphold these systems.
That's so timely, because while there is a we, there is also an I, and your question fits beautifully with a conversation I was having about maybe 2 hours ago now with somebody in terms of that personal work, right? On my bio slide, it included the word introvert. I am an introvert. I may not present as an introvert or a traditional introvert, but I very am internally processing all the time. And I recognize that from that positionality, I show up in spaces in different ways. And I recognize that there's individual work that I need to do to hold on to the multitudes of who I am, so that I can also be in connection to the multitudes that are across from me in a space. Are they always going to gel? No, right? If there are shared high values, can you move in a way where rupture happens and repair is also held highly? Absolutely. And I think the structure of cooperative living, the structure of cooperative enterprise allows people to always come back to that space. But it does require you to have done your work before you make the commitment. Yeah. I was also amiss at expressing condolences about the loss of your grandmother. I know that loss.
Thank
And
you,
I also know the power of grandmother. That grandmother energy is very powerful for us. So yeah, thank you for your question. I think I saw Erica's hand, but I'm not sure whether it went down or whether they still wanted to say anything.
Erica like me?
Yeah,
Yeah?
Erica like you,
Okay.
yes.
You know what? I did not raise my hand, but in my heart, I was like, should I say something? I want to share something. Yeah, because there's I'm being on like quantum physics, and part of that is we create what we focus on. And I'm beginning to kind of step a little bit away from trying to fight the systems to like designing new systems. And I really like this cooperative economics perspective because I feel like it's viable to replace old systems, you know, and the way we're going now and the way the dollar is going now, we're like gonna need people, I think, that think more cooperatively in terms of food, economics, just the way we really just kind of get out of the individual mentality and more into a collective approach. And so I really enjoyed your presentation. And I actually, one of my dreams is to find a group of people to buy a building, like a co-op, you know. I think that's the way it's going. Like, it's not, let's see what this white investors or you know, like it's just like I've read the stats for that, and I think like Black women only have like 1% of what is invested, you know. So it's like it's not exactly. We need to look for other approaches, and I think in the community and cooperative economics is a really good approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you so for sharing. I want to invite Jen Large. Jen, you shared. I don't know if you're able to share vocally. You can put in the chat if you're not able to contribute, or I can just read it out. Just let me know.
I'll move very quickly into the other room to read it. But yeah, mostly I mean, I'm in a space right now watching my godson, which is that cooperative space, taking agency over children that I have decided are my family. And so this set of presentations has just been really powerful as well, because of some of the conversations that we have had in the fellowship space and outside of it. And yeah, I'm just it was so synergetic between the two of you, and obviously you knew that, but yeah, your two voices just really showing what that cooperative energy space and intention, sort of going back to what Amber talked about, the intention of these spaces being a true uplift of community and a true way of sustaining that over time, through the thick, through the thin, through the rich, through the poor. Just really reaching back to bring forward. So just really grateful.
Thank you, Jen. Just what beautiful shares and what beautiful dreaming is happening in this space. I just want to acknowledge that. And again, thanking you for your presence, thanking you for your contributions and support. Thank you.
Thank you again, Cecilia. Thank you, everyone, for your participation and engagement. We have one more fellow closing us out today. Thank you. I do want to just remind that I will once again drop the application in the chat. We are right now accepting applications for the 2022-23. So I really, again, this is the cooperative aspect. Do you know someone who isn't on the call right now that would love to learn more? Reach out to them, that I'm here, you're here, and who can you reach out to have this experience? I have a informational session happening next Friday afternoon. So you can go on to the CIIS SharePoint for Emerging Black Clinicians to learn more. And I'll also put the application in the chat. So taking a breath. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our final presenter for the 2022 cohort, Tracy Williams. Tracy,
Sorry.
Tracy is a 2023 graduate candidate, Masters of Arts in Counseling, Community Mental Health. Hi, Tracy.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm so honored to be here around just all all you brilliant minds and folks that are just interested, you know, I'm sure you're brilliant minds as well. I'm a little nervous, and also disclaimer, there is a lot that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do the utmost in this presentation. It may or may not work well. However, please just grant me some clemency. I will be reading off of some notes because I'm ADHD. And so if without these notes, I am liable to go down a tunnel and not find my way back. So without further ado, the first thing that I would like to do is offer a libation. I'm going to offer this libation of apple cider vinegar. I'm doing it in a chalice of green onyx. And green onyx is a stone meaning power and courage and hope. I don't have, because it's acidic, I don't have any plants in my house that will benefit from the acidity. So I'm going to pour it into this soil, and then I will merge it with some plants that I have outside that will benefit. The apple cider vinegar is really important to me because it was something that was always in my cabinet growing up. It was in my grandmother's cabinet. Everybody I knew took a shot of that every now and then, especially in times where your immune system it's down or could be down in the fall and the change of the seasons. And so raw apple cider vinegar contains the same probiotics and yeast as the vinegar found in 5,000-year-old urns in Kemetic, ancient Egypt. And even some Babylonian scrolls date it back even further, so to 7,000 years. And vinegar helps feed healthy gut bacteria in our stomach. It helps neutralize bad bacteria and helps break down our foods. So if we're thinking about as our ancestors in Africa are moving and migrating from place to place, whether it's because of war or trying to find food sources, and they're entering these unknown landscapes and unknown food sources, the vinegar would help promote breaking down anything that would have been difficult because of a change in diet. It also helps promote the production of serotonin in the body, and that's the body's happy hormone, and 90% of that is created in the digestive tract. So and so with that libation, which I should have done just now, it is to ask the ancestors to embody this material that I'm about to share, and that if there's any wisdom and truth in this material, it be made known and received by the audience here. So I will start to share my screen. So I'm going to be talking about psychedelics in the African American community. I'm going to, my subtitle here is Strong Irony, Spiritual Pedagogy, and Sankofa Praxis. So, in the book, Power, Resistance, and Liberation in Therapy with Survivals of Trauma to Have Our Hearts Broken, Taiwo Afoape talks about something called strong irony, or the idea of holding two seemingly opposing beliefs or ways of being at the same time and allowing them both to be true. So strong irony is not an either or, but a both and. So one big struggle that I've had in integrating all the parts of myself is understanding and accepting these mystical truths that I've experienced secularly and in the use of psychedelics. That seems to be in opposition with my Christian upbringing. So how do I honor both what has sustained my ancestors through the worst experiences in modernity, even though that very thing was used to enslave and oppress them, like Christianity, and then what has sustained my pre-colonial ancestors and all its magic and mysticism, in Africa. So Dr. Wade Nobles refers to this notion as scattered consciousness and fractured identity. And so I just really want to thank LaTronda Lumpkins, who's not here, for reminding me of this in just like a passing conversation, and it became one of a resource that I'm using. And so it is impossible to talk about the reclamation of any African birthright without talking about the notion of Sankofa, and it's from the Akan people of Ghana, meaning to go back, to retrieve, which basically is to go back in the past and retrieve what is useful for the present and then for future growth. So find what was forgotten and use it for future wisdom and development. So knowledge and practice or praxis, which I first learned from Dr. D, who's no longer, I think, in audience, I learned it last year in the fall when I first started this program, and I went and sat in on her talk about Sankofa praxis. And it was largely forgot about, or so I thought, until Tuesday's talk, where she spoke of the same thing. And Dr. D's dissertation of Sankofa praxis, she states, through its focus on ethnographic research and autoethnography, it's a method that seeks to systematically analyze personal experience in an attempt to make sense of cultural experience. So I realized that it was exactly, this was the process that I've been using intuitively for the layout of my research. And I say this stuff referentially here in this presentation right now. And it's really testament to Dr. D's genius, because the framework really shows that this process is alive and well and working. So I really want to give thanks to her. And I won't talk about, her story, but she speaks of her journey and says that she would go to school for guidance. And so I also, in times of, I think, distress and tribulation, when I would find myself out of alignment, I would look toward education. And I was fascinated with the science of healing. And I still am. Like, how does it happen? Where does it happen? And for whom does it happen? So, that being said, I'm a certified wilderness therapist, a yoga instructor, and herbalist. And one day I hope to be a therapist. So these learnings are tools for personal transformation and liberation first. And, Afwakwe also says, in order to be liberated, people need to be re-educated, which means developing a new praxis or adopting an old one. So Sankofa praxis allows for both of those things to happen simultaneously, a bit of a strong irony, and across many disciplines. Sorry, here we go. So here is the Sankofa bird. So I've seen the Sankofa bird depicted two ways. So this is one, the one here on the right is the one that's most familiar with me through the BPP and what I learned from Dr. D. And the one on the left is one in my research, just keeps coming up. And so it was very curious. So I started to think about it and to read the differences of like perspective. And so Sankofa, the Sankofa bird is a bird with the feet in the past and the head turning toward the future, with the egg of knowledge in its mouth. So going back to retrieve what is useful. So find what's forgotten and use it for development and wisdom. And so, one way is to go back and retrieve the egg and place it forward. It's the one on the left looks like it's facing toward the future. It depends on perspective again. Facing one way, grabbing the egg as I think of it in the past, to pull the egg of wisdom to the present and then going forward in the future. And then the Sankofa bird on the right looks like it possibly grabbed the egg from the past and is placing it in the future. So, and then I just played around with like mirroring of the continent of Africa, and then the Sankofa heart, okay, which is used in a lot of like funeral rites and rituals. So, and I'm dedicating this presentation to my grandmother, Evelyn Forrest Hall, who passed in 2011. May she rest well with the ancestors. And I would come to the kitchen as she cooked food for the community, and I would ask, like, where do we come from? Because she doesn't look like me, exactly, And in fact, it's so funny because she used to call me Chinaman, and because I had slanty eyes, but I got them from her. I'm like, I get them from you. And so I would ask her always, I'd be like, where do we come from? Like, where, I knew a bit about slave history, and she would always reply, girl, you're Black like me. That's all you need to know. And so in her oversimplified answer, she unknowingly revealed the complexity of Blackness and fueled my desire to know more about why that answer provided me with both clarity, like, okay, I'm Black like you, at least I belong somewhere, and also confusion, but I'm not really Black like you. And also, what does Black mean? What does this mean? So this research represents a continuity in the work of integrating all parts of myself, and I was first shown this work, what I believe is this work from a very young age. So I mentioned my ADHD. Another part of my neurodivergence is that I was diagnosed as narcoleptic, and also it had accompanying fainting spells when I was young. So, you know, the doctor said that this diagnosis was due to my apnea, which meant that I just like held my breath a lot, and it was related to a stress response, you know, and you know, and that made sense, you know, 7 kids growing up in a Habitat for Humanity community, you know, impoverished. There was a lot of chaos. It seemed to make sense to me. And then aside from the fainting spells, the biggest characteristic of narcolepsy is lucid dreaming. So, and this is all, it's out there, you can Google it. And so I would have lucid dreaming, which also came with recurring dreams and dream recall. So dream work and the deciphering of like symbols and messages, and finding connections and meaning to those in my waking reality became something I played with at a young age. And the stakes were really low. It was like, what candy should I buy? What should I wear to school? But it became a game of intuition and then intuition. Like, what was I being told and then why? And, oh, sorry, go back. Yes. So my first psychedelic experience was on mushrooms, and it was at my university, the fall of my freshman year. And I went to Dartmouth College. It was there's very few Black people in that campus. And my best friend at the time, who was also a Black girl, she was from Trinidad and Tobago, and she had given them to me. And so I ate them. I trusted her, and she looked like me, and I trusted her, so I ate them. And it was so interesting because as I was kind of coming up into the journey, I had this download of all the reoccurring dreams that I ever had. And there was something that told me that that was a realization that that was all preparing me for this work and this mushroom experience. And so, sorry, my sister just called and I put it on mute, but anyway, and I experienced this like lightness of being and then all this joy and bliss. And I was able to like relax completely in this experience. However, so we're upstairs in a room, and like they're very exploratory. And so we decided to take a ceremonial cigarette break. And this first picture is a secret society called the Sphinx that's at Dartmouth that was built in the mid 1800s. It burned down, they had to rebuild it. And the smaller picture is the front of it. So where we were having our smoke break was literally right here. If you can see my cursor, it was on the side of this building. So this was our view. And as we're sitting there and we're smoking, I'm seeing all of these people, like white individuals, walking by in sheets. And they were walking to this frat, which is based on the movie Animal House. The frat is Alpha Delta. And it's literally the guy who wrote Animal House went to Dartmouth and went to this frat. And so I was seeing a lot of people like this walking around, like way too many. And imagine this is my first psychedelic experience. And so first I said, to myself, they're wearing the sheets the wrong way. Because I was like thinking like there's all these like drunk white people. I was thinking KKK. So I was like, they're wearing the sheets the wrong way. And then there was a different realization that came in. I was like, well, where do you think they even got those sheet style from? This is just a different version. And this was the originator. So there was something that it wasn't like abject fear or anything, but it was just like something just told me to go further into the forest. That's what the medicine said. It was like, get away from here and go further into the forest. So we were walking around campus and we saw all of these people in sheets, and they weren't all going to this one place, but it turns out that there were 3 toga parties on campus that night in different places. So you couldn't escape this. So when we went into the forest, we ended up at the cemetery of all places. And ironically, that's where we felt the most comfortable, because to me, I was like, if the ghosts are on campus, they're not here in the cemetery. And so, I had many, many moments with this medicine, and it kept making itself known to me. When I lived in a commune in Hawaii, when I went fishing in Alaska, I lived on a mountain in Colorado and worked for the National Forest Service. in Indonesia the night I met my my ex-husband, who's British, and then also when I was conceiving my son on the coast of Cornwall, England. And it was also, the medicine was also with me when I fled that husband's abuse and moved to a remote Amazonian jungle in Ecuador. And I needed to kind of come back into myself and remember who I was. So the medicine was with me at all these like pivotal moments in my life, and including when I was at Dartmouth again, but working this time as an assistant director. And I had all this millions of dollars of endowment to redistribute to the campus. And I had gone to a director at the Native American office, and I asked her if she would like to do some programming with me. And I had all this funding to support, and she said that I didn't have access to Native American culture. And I felt deflated. I felt a little bit like, if I could say this, Jesus being like denied by Judas. I was like, but don't you know who I am? Like, our struggles are the same. Like, why was she wrong? And I don't know if you all remember the picture of my grandmother, but just there, where is she? Sorry. But the woman at Dartmouth my grandmother looked more Native American in my eyes than she did. So I was like, well, why was she wrong? What am I missing here? So, I couldn't find enough. I decided to try to find it, figure it out. Like, why did that sit so wrong with me? Why didn't that seem like a truth? So I couldn't find enough evidence in North Carolina because, my grandmother was the matriarch, and if she wouldn't tell me where we're from, nobody knew. And also because of history, our history is erased. But what I did know was what I Googled about William Slave. I put William Slave migration, and I ended up finding the Book of Negroes. And I traced a Williams ancestor all the way to Nova Scotia, where during the Revolutionary War, Blacks from the South, slaves from the South were recruited by English soldiers to fight on behalf of the crown, and they were going to be given their 40 acres and a mule, whether or not they won or lost. So they recruited a lot of folks, and then when eventually the British lost, they deposited these now freed slaves in Nova Scotia. Obviously, that's not their land to be given away. So it belonged to the Mi'kmaq and the Mi'kmaq people. So I wrote a grant at my job, and I was like, well, I'm going to go up there and I'm going to investigate those and, our native African roots in this indigenous territory. So I went with my son, who was 8 months at the time. I went with a friend who was here, Latreia Graham from the South Carolina. So she's Gullah. Which is another Afro-Indigenous group of individuals. And we started to explore, and sure enough, we looked, and I was able to see the name Williams in the Book of Negroes. And that was fascinating. And there again sat this strong irony in the nexus, in that infinitesimal space in between time, which is history, and myself and other, or myself as other, in relation to that Indigenous woman on campus. So I started thinking about where else did this strong irony, or these little this little nexus of me and other and me as other, where else did that appear geographically? So it turns out that it appears and reaches in the brain. So give me a second. So belonging to a subgroup of psychoactive compounds called hallucinogens, psychedelic, these on the left are like common vehicles of use of psychedelics. So some of them come in pills and tabs. There's the actual mushroom, things that you can identify as coming from nature. And so the consumption of which alters an individual's state of consciousness and perception of reality. Or what I like to say, it reorganized my metaphysical awareness of self, others, and the surrounding environment. So where you thought you were is not where you used to be. And then that may lead to a personal epiphany as to where you should be. So this is how I came to understand ego death. That is experienced, commonly an experience in the psychedelic journeying. So, and this is also seen in time crystals, and time crystals are only understood by mapping the brain and figuring out where parts of the brain are lining up depending on a shared experience that's being fed to it. And then this also comes into quantum theory, and it's built by using the same mechanics. So it's basically like two objects can exist at the same time in different places, the you and the not you simultaneously. So like strong irony. So, and then on the right, you get, these are chemical structures for psychoactive compounds. And I really bring these into I'm bringing them into the presentation because this is what is relevant for legalization and decriminalization. And then this is how they affect like the physiological quantifiable processes. So it's important when framing how they are currently being made known to us and available to us, and how this correlates to our Black community's response to that. So psychedelics affect the production and release of serotonin in the brain by binding to the receptors. And overall, they can produce feelings of euphoria, naturally equating to feelings of intimacy and empathy. And I find that as a byproduct, that gives you a feeling of connectedness and joy. So, I'm missing one, sorry. So I have to go forward and then back. So this is the relevance. Sorry, I will, yeah. So this is some relevance to what I was saying. So these are maps of the brain. And this is on the right is the brain under the influence of psilocybin. And so the psychedelics alter consciousness by disrupting the default mode network, and that regulates the fight or flight and freeze response. And so it disrupts those, and instead it rewires our brain instead of fear and fight and flight for connection. And so, instead of, being in a moment where you could be triggered by something, you find another avenue in order to connect to the actual reality that you're from, or that you're in, and saying, okay, this isn't happening, this is happening instead. And so I also choose mushrooms for this picture because that's what would have been readily available to tribal Africans. They were growing it ubiquitously, and they were cultivated. And mushrooms also grow out of the same soil that ancestors were buried in. So there is this understanding that it's part of an ecosystem, it's part of a cycle that is happening. And, as far as what I would suggest to anybody curious is to start there. And you might find with trying a lot of other things, you might end up there anyway. But I do believe that the experience leads to deeper wisdom. And wisdom is divinely hard to define, and it's not because it's not quantifiable by scientific standards. And it's funny that advancements in science are being made to try to locate and measure consciousness. And I believe those things are intrinsically linked, like consciousness and wisdom. I also want to note that, I am learning about this, by standing on the shoulders of giants. And one of those is Kalindi, who's an expert African martial artist and was an outspoken psychedelic advocate in the 70s. And he actually believed that mushrooms were a form of extraterrestrial being and that they were like a perfect being. And I agree with him regarding their divinity. But there's some nuances there that maybe I need to work out. But it is cool to know that they're found growing in Chernobyl, and they filter out the radioactive material there, and it exponentially cuts down the half-life of that radioactive material. So they're a purifier. So I'm gonna go back to this slide. And so, they're currently used in therapy to treat these conditions like PTSD, trauma-resistant depression, anxiety, substance misuse disorder, suicidal ideations. And these ones are at least all co-occurring, I think. They're comorbid. So you have some of them that come with another thing. And PTSD, you can have any number of these or all of them happening and still be under this umbrella of PTSD. They're also used for palliative care, so ease the end of life suffering. And the irony here is that many African Americans are living in, so PTSD, the way that it started being treated and looked at was because it was being administered to veterans and shown to ease some of their suffering after coming back from war. And, you know, the irony is that like many African Americans and a lot of other BIPOC individuals are living in warlike conditions here in their own home soil. They don't have to go to Afghanistan, et cetera, and in their own communities. So like gang violence, police brutality, harassments, and many other issues stemming from poverty and systemic oppression. So for anyone familiar with the ACEs or the Adverse Childhood Experiences study, they'll know this, they'll be familiar with this idea. And I first heard about this, the ACEs study through Nadine Burke-Harris, a Black pediatrician, and also Menicum's My Grandmother's Hands. You know, and it found that violence, neglect, abuse, witnessing violence in the community, having a family member attempt suicide, living at home with substance abuse or misuse disorder, mental health issues, and instability due to parental separation or caretaker incarceration are all linked to chronic health problems and mental illness. And these actually change your DNA. So that means that your, you know, future progeny are going to be predisposed to having all of these same conditions, and all roads lead to early death. So in this pyramid on the right, this is Menicum's. The initial pyramid of adverse childhood experiences just starts with this one, the red childhood experiences, and then goes to early death. But we know that early childhood, these adverse childhood experiences are only at the hands of an adult with some adverse adult or childhood experiences. And then we can follow that breadcrumb back to historical trauma. So this map.
Just say a 5-minute time check.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this shows 6.2 million people who were directly impacted by the new legislation of the legalization of decriminalization. And that's a lot of individuals. And that's a lot of individuals directly, but then think about what happens when those individuals go home and then they have a settled body and a settled mind. These are educational institutions currently doing research, but there's a lack of Black participants. In fact, in 2017, there was a study conducted, and only 2.5 of those in the 18 studies were African American. And why is that? So historical trauma. There's a loss of privacy, stigma, repeat of history, truth in the miseducation and lies. So loss of privacy is being on the radar and being tracked for honest admission of use. Fear of what freedoms are going to be taken away. There's a stigma and the judgment of like a Christian God, which is the cornerstone of like our community. Repeat of history. So the early psychedelic and eugenics movements were all built on the backs of African Americans and other BIPOC individuals. There were 500 studies published by the Addiction Research Center, which tested the limits of human tolerance for psychedelics and opiates. And that was all by mainly afflicted on mainly Black prisoners. And then the truth and the miseducation and lies, believing that we are violent and hypersexualized and unsophisticated. So believing that, you know, like being a part of more scientific studies is going to flush out some more these scientific findings that then create legislature adversely based, you know, and that affect our lives. Just as in the eugenics movement in the 1950s, and they were examining, in the 1930s and 40s, they were examining Black genitalia and correlating the size, the larger size of genitalia to why African Americans were so aggressive, and not their treatment of African Americans. And then even my mom, she was born, everybody was doing home births, and so her birth certificate is a week late because the white doctor refused to honor when she was actually born. She didn't exist until he had seen her and could sign off on her birth certificate. So she just celebrates for a week. And they're all intrinsically linked to colonization of the Black mind and body. And I think what's happening here, you know, with all of the decriminalization and the movement forward to legalize, is that it's a much of a revolution as it is a renaissance. So I think that African Americans should we should take part in this conversation to decide what happens with our bodies and help control the narrative of what is in our best interests versus leaving that up to others. And this majority, this white majority, which exists in the political realm and the scientific realm, which then governs everything that we can do. And, you know, much like the legalization of marijuana and the Cannabis Administration and Opportunities Act, I'm sure we've heard that Biden is pardoning like over 6,000 individuals that were picked up on, you know, what used to be felonies for, you know, having small amounts of marijuana. So the folks that aren't pardoned are anybody who has anything other than marijuana or like another Class A drug, or anybody with weapons charges. But it's like, you know, Black and brown bodies that have chronic PTSD, it's adaptive, not pathological, as Afuape says. And then we have to examine the whys. Why is it that drugs became a viable mode of employment in our communities, and why the need for our own, like, to be armed in our own neighborhoods? And so this is part 2, but I gotta wrap it up. Sorry, it went a lot fast. So I just want to say, claiming our ancestral birthright, a tough mind and a tender heart. So Dr. Martin Luther King in his book of essays like Strength and Love addresses the tension between ideology and lived experiences, among other ironies. And the funny thing about irony is to iron something means to shackle it with irons. So Martin Luther King was a reverend, he was a warrior, he was a man free and yet oppressed, talk about irony. And just like many of us. And so why do we need to claim our ancestor birthright? Why do we need to claim something that's already ours? And I will skip forwards through some of these and just say that we can trace our African-American access and the stewardship that we have of these ancient sacred medicines, because that's what they are. You know, every food is your medicine. So there is a garlic to boost your immune system. There is a plant to talk to ancestors. There is senna leaf tea to help you poop. There are so many things to do, you know, like this has been from time immemorial in our heritage and history. So psychedelics is just like comes along with that. And I will skip to our call to action. And I'm sorry that I am not timely. There is a lot here. So taking our place in psychedelic future history, a clinician's call to action. So I believe that these medicines are making themselves known to us now. To repair ruptures between ourselves and our ancestral wisdom, a chance to change our story from victim to victorious. And there is hope in current legislation, as well in our Pan-African and Afro-Indigenous histories, where there's an intersection between groups of individuals that still have that tie to the land and still have these sacred rights and medicines. But we first need to be in community with ourselves first, and then with others. So just like with clients, all healing comes from trust built interpersonally and starting with the me, myself, and I. So know thyself. And this know thyself is attributed to Socrates, but it first appeared in Kemetic scripture and says, all is within yourself. Know your most inward self and look for what corresponds with it in nature. And that's an ancient Egyptian proverb. How well do you know you? Are you inconsistent? What are your biases? Be curious. Be curious about the good, the bad, and ugly. We were told lies about African savagery. So that is the bad and ugly. So why be afraid of our psychedelic history? I mean, it could be just as bad or it could be completely liberating. What is there a threat? What threat does that pose possibly to Africans and African Americans, if not to our oppressor? They're afraid of us knowing that information and that knowledge, which is why it was kept from us. So we need to communicate with our Indigenous brothers and sisters about co-stewardship of this land and the medicine, how to respect and honor them. So be open to new ways of thinking and being, practice unconditional positive regard for nature in all of its forms and as a sustaining force. ally yourselves with nature, know it, respect it, and your connection to it. And also, and lastly, be current. What are evidence-based practices and methodologies? Educate yourself and educate others. So psychedelics are now evidence-based practices. Just as you wouldn't give psychedelics to anyone who came into your office asking for them, nor would you refuse to have a conversation with anybody coming in curious about them as a therapeutic choice that they have. And again, only 4% of all therapists in the country are Black. And Heidi, last week you said 2.7 were Black in the Bay Area. And I think this week you said 2%, but we can round down. I mean, the numbers are low is the point. So folks are going to need people that are trusted faces to do this work. And we're going to be educated on our history and our psychedelic history and on psychedelics in general. And, you know, talk about some of the new Afrocentric theories being created to empower Black people so that we're ready. And so that just goes into being good therapists, period. And then one of the last slides here, this is, I'm not in the Bay Area, but I did, just in case people are curious and really wanting to know that and are hungry for this information, these are Bay Area-based communities, community-based organizations that are talking about psychedelics and geared toward BIPOCs specifically. So I really encourage you to just be a part of the conversation, you know, ask questions to folks. I also want to give a shout out to Bia Labate, who is the executive director of Shakuna. I saw her talk at the Horizons Northwest conference here in Portland, Oregon, and she was so beautiful. She like embraced my son and took care of him for a minute. And then we started talking and she sent me some really great resources that I'm eager to like just keep getting more and more into. And I'm loving that all of this research led me further and further into the forest. And I can't wait to go even deeper. And I can't wait to meet my ancestors there. So are there any questions?
Did you take oh, there we go.
Sorry?
No, I was just going to ask you to take the share screen down, and then you did. I'm just taking a big inhale and exhale, and the brilliance of fitting a 2-day conference into 30 minutes, because that was so powerful. And I felt how much you are in the forest, you said, like in the study. And I'm just really seeing you and seeing all that you brought. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Yeah,
You know,
likewise.
Sorry.
I was going to say likewise, Tracy. I'm really appreciative of this opportunity to see the wealth of knowledge that you have. And I think you will be a just super supportive person in the space as we navigate this, particularly for the people that we're trying to serve. So thank you for sharing your wisdom.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate sharing about psychedelics. That's an interest of mine, and I am here because of the medicine. And I really thank you for sharing all your personal experience and the way that your ancestors called you. And yeah, let's keep normalizing talking about psychedelics and like their messages, you know, because they're real even if they're not quantifiable. And as science puts it, you know.
Tracy, I just want to say I appreciate your presentation, and particularly the image you showed of the brain, where the connections, the brain under the influence of psilocybin and all these connections. And it kind of reminds me also of tying into Cecilia and Kenyona's presentation about the collective and what, you know, this plant nature experience has to offer. So thank you for that and sharing your experience.
As within, so without, those connections start here and then like just come out. Yeah. You know, and I will say just one other thing, like, I feel like I went so far down this rabbit hole. I mean, you all saw that I skipped slides, and I'm so hungry to share more of this information. So if anybody wants any more of this information, I will dump it right on you. And I've had several hundred psychedelic experiences full on, and many more microdosing experiences. And like 90% of them were with mushrooms, but 90% of all of those experiences, 99 probably, happened prior to me doing this research. And so I get to now take all of this information that I learned, and my ongoing or my future psychedelic experiences will now be deeply rooted in the forest. And I'm really excited for what other message, like, it's led me this far, and I feel like, yeah, it's going to be a beautiful journey to build on this in all the ways.
Thank you. So I want to make room for any other reflections or feedback in the chat as we begin to close our space together. Thank you, Kenyona, who is logged off, Cecilia and Tracy. Wanting to take a collective breath and appreciate every presentation that came before today's. I want to take a collective breath and appreciate all of the shoulders we stand on, the research that has supported each of your presentations. I want to appreciate everyone who is on this call and every call ahead to support our emerging clinicians, our emerging Black clinicians, to bring their inner intelligence, their research, and their lived and studied knowing into the collective space. Thank you so much. I will stay on if there are any questions about the fellowship or any needs, but otherwise, thank you everyone. Have a blessed evening, and emerging Black clinicians, you know where to find me. Thank you.